My name is Dahlia Monroe. That night, under the glittering lights of a fundraising gala at the Chicago Museum, the very man who once vowed to protect me, betrayed me, in front of more than 250 guests. He smiled, raised his glass to honor me, then instantly changed his tone, publicly revealing the secret from my teenage years that I thought would stay buried forever, turning me into the center of suspicion and gossip. I stood there feeling my heart splinter, but I also knew Ethan had started a battle he could never win. If you've ever been betrayed, humiliated in a place that was supposed to be yours, you know exactly how deep that pain cuts. Leave a comment to share your own story, hit like and subscribe to join me on this journey, because what happened after that went far beyond anything you could imagine. I was born and raised in a small town in Indiana, where everyone knew your name and your past clung to it for life. When I was 17, one winter night I was arrested after a fight, but the truth was I had been fighting for my life. My boyfriend at the time, a popular boy at school, had turned aggressive after drinking. I was cornered against a wall, hit so hard I was terrified. In a moment of pure panic, I grabbed whatever was near my hand to defend myself. When the police arrived, they found me trembling, bruised. But they also saw him clutching his face, his mouth bleeding. The story twisted quickly. His family was well known in town, and I was only the daughter of a single waitress. Luckily, a public defender proved I had been abused and the record was sealed. But in a place that's small, secrets never truly sleep. Only a handful of people knew the full truth, and I had always believed I could trust them. After graduation, I left Indiana and never looked back. Chicago welcomed me with skyscrapers and bustling streets. I studied journalism, pouring everything into proving I was not defined by my past. In my early years as a reporter, I took on tough assignments, corruption investigations, cold cases, and slowly I built a name for myself. Ethan came into my life when I thought I'd finally found my footing. We met at a legal seminar I attended to find sources for a story. He was a young lawyer, confident, articulate, with a way of listening that made you feel every word you said mattered. During our conversations, I told him about my past in Indiana. He took my hand and said something I believed with my whole heart at the time. You're not defined by your past, Dahlia. I love who you are now. We married after 2 years of dating. At first, Ethan was exactly the partner I needed, supporting my work, encouraging me to chase the toughest stories and helping plan our future. When I proposed creating a fund for domestic violence victims, he not only backed it but co-founded it with me, using his legal connections to quickly give it credibility. Our fund became a refuge for hundreds of women and children, offering safe housing, legal aid, and counseling. Every time I saw them slowly regain their smiles, I felt parts of my own broken self begin to heal. But everything began to shift about a year ago. Ethan started attending political fundraising parties, mingling with people I recognized from my investigations, men who got rich from shady deals or buried scandals with money. I warned him, we have to be careful. Not every dollar is clean. He smiled lightly as if I was overreacting. That's politics, Dahlia. If we want the fund to grow, we have to play the game. I disagreed. Every donation needed to be transparent. That had been my rule from the start. But Ethan began pushing to take money from a construction company I had once exposed for withholding workers' wages and rigging bids. When I protested fiercely, his tone turned cold. You're standing in my way. And in the fund's way. From then on, a gap opened between us. He came home later, kept his phone face down, and had more urgent calls. Our 10-year-old daughter, Harper, still believed her dad was a hero. She'd run to the door to show him her drawings or perfect test scores. But I began to see something calculating in his eyes. Like every word, every move, was part of a plan I wasn't privy to. One evening, while reviewing the fund's financial report, I spotted a large donation from a community organization, established less than 3 months earlier, with no website or public record. When I asked Ethan, he brushed it off. A friend recommended them. Money is money, don't overthink it. That night, I lay awake, remembering his gaze in recent meetings, not one of shared purpose but of measured gain. And I began to realize Ethan no longer saw me as a partner, but as an obstacle. He once said my past didn't define me. But now, to him, my past was a weapon, a card he could play to silence me if needed. I had no idea how completely everything would shatter the moment he took the stage at the gala that night. I remember it vividly. The night after the gala, our house was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking. Harper was asleep, but I was still in the living room, unable to take off my heels because my feet felt frozen since leaving the museum. The door opened. Ethan walked in, tossed his coat on a chair, moving as if he had returned from a casual drink with friends, not from publicly exposing his wife's most private secret to hundreds of people. I stood, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "Why did you do that?" He stopped, looking directly at me. The usual polished smile was gone, replaced by something stripped bare and cold. "Because, Dahlia, I need this political career. And you are a liability." Felt like a slap. A liability? I built this fund with you from nothing. I've stood by you through every project, every campaign. Ethan shrugged and poured himself a glass of whiskey. "Yes, but you don't fit anymore. Your past, it can't be sold to voters or donors." I clenched my fists, holding back tears. "So you humiliate me in the middle of a gala, in front of the press and every sponsor we have?" He took a sip, unflinching. "Think of it as a reminder. And to make sure you understand, the only way to keep things from getting worse is to sign these papers." He pulled a folder from his briefcase, placing it on the glass table. I looked down. A contract transferring all management rights of the fund, along with several joint accounts, into his name. "If you sign, I'll leave it alone. No one will dig deeper into your past." His tone was as casual as if he were discussing a routine transaction. I raised my eyes to his. "And if I don't?" Ethan smiled, a smile colder than ice. "Then I'll take Harper from you. You know that sealed juvenile record of yours can still be brought up in court. With the best lawyers, I can make everyone believe you're a danger to her." The room seemed to shrink. Harper, only 10 years old. She loved her father, but she still needed her mother. I pictured her leaving the house to live with a man I no longer recognized, and a chilling fear ran down my spine. "You'd use our daughter to blackmail me?" Ethan set his glass down, the sound hitting the table sharp and final. "I'll do whatever it takes to protect my future. You know that." I stayed silent for a few seconds, breathing deeply to stay calm. "I'm not signing. And I won't let you take Harper either." He let out a dry laugh. "You're backing yourself into a corner, Dahlia." I stepped closer, stopping just one step away from him. "No. You're the one walking into something you'll regret." Ethan didn't reply, he only shook his head, slid the folder back into his briefcase and headed upstairs. I listening to his footsteps fade, then the sound of the bedroom door closing. The air felt heavy, suffocating, as if warning of a storm about to break. That night I didn't sleep. I sat by Harper's bed, watching her sleep soundly, her peaceful face untouched by the threats and power plays that had unfolded between her parents. I stroked her hair and whispered, "I won't let anyone tear us apart." In the dark, I knew one thing for certain. Ethan had crossed far beyond the line between disagreement and betrayal. He had chosen to use our daughter as a bargaining chip. And if he thought I would sit quietly and let him decide the fate of both me and Harper, then he had forgotten who I was and where I came from. Harper started to change in the weeks after that tense confrontation between me and Ethan. My little girl, who used to cling to me and tell me everything about school, now gave short, guarded answers. Many evenings when I asked how dinner was, she'd shrug or say, "Dad says it's fine," and fall silent. One Friday afternoon I picked her up from school early. She walked out with a group of friends, but when she saw me she froze and avoided my eyes. In the car I tried to start a conversation. "Anything fun happen in class this week?" She gripped her seat belt tighter, answering curtly, "Not really." "Are you okay?" I asked gently. Harper stared out the window. "Dad said you once hurt someone so badly you had to go to jail. Is that true?" The question was like a blade twisting in my chest. I had to breathe deeply before answering. "Sweetheart, that happened when I was a teenager. I didn't hurt someone because I wanted to. I was being hurt first and I was only trying to protect myself." "But Dad said," Harper trailed off, then stayed quiet. I understood. Ethan was feeding her one-sided stories. And even if she didn't fully believe them, the seed of doubt had been planted. That filled me with both anger and fear. As if that weren't enough, the next blow came from where I least expected. Marissa. We'd been friends since college. I trusted her completely when I asked her to be the fund's CFO. Marissa always said, "If there's anyone I'd trust with my life, it's you." But one Monday morning she called to say briefly, "Dahlia, I'm sorry but I have to resign." I froze. What's going on? We're in the middle of the winter campaign, and we still have so many grant applications to process. I can't go into details. I think it's best if I step away. Her voice shook, but it was firm. I tried to keep my own steady. Marissa, if something's wrong, we can work through it together. Don't walk away like this. I'm really sorry. The line went dead. That afternoon, I discovered the fund's accounting server was inaccessible. The bank account was locked from my admin access. All the passwords had been changed. She was the only one who could have done it. 2 days later, Ethan called for an emergency board meeting. After a quick vote, they announced my temporary suspension as executive director pending an independent audit. Then the leaks began. A tabloid ran a headline: "Founder of famous charity fund has a violent criminal record, hundreds of thousands missing." In the article, they quoted an internal source claiming I had hidden my past to win donor trust. I got dozens of calls in a single day, not to check on me but to demand clarification or to cancel contracts. Major donors pulled out in waves. People who had once sent me thank you notes for saving them now went silent, or avoided me altogether. That night, my phone buzzed nonstop with messages confirming cancellations. Harper was upstairs with her door closed. Ethan was probably somewhere savoring his victory. The spacious house felt suddenly hollow, the ticking clock pressing against every beat of my crumbling composure. I remember exactly what I thought in that moment. Months ago, I was running a thriving fund, my family seemed stable, and Harper trusted me completely. Now everything was collapsing, brick by brick, and the hands pushing it down belonged to the man I once called my husband, along with the betrayal of a friend I'd considered family. Perhaps the most painful part wasn't losing contracts or having my public image smeared. It was the sense of complete isolation. Every time I reached for my phone to call someone, I stopped asking myself, will they believe me? And most of the time the answer was, I'm not sure. I sat there for hours, staring out the window at the lit streets, where people moved along as if nothing had happened. But for me, the world was no longer the same. Ethan had opened a public front against me, and Marissa had taken away the tools I needed to defend myself. And Harper, my only daughter, was slowly slipping from my grasp under the steady drip of her father's words. At that moment, I didn't yet know how I would fight back. But I knew one thing: if I gave up now, I would lose everything. Not my reputation or my work, but my daughter. And that I would never allow. I spent an entire week in a haze, trying to keep from collapsing under the storm Ethan had unleashed. Then one night near midnight, while clearing out the cabinet under the stairs, I found something that had been untouched for years: a small black hard drive wrapped in a moisture-proof bag. This wasn't an ordinary hard drive. I remembered the day the witness gave me a supervised login and asked me to mirror the evidence during a money laundering investigation 5 years earlier, when I was still an investigative reporter. The case had been dropped after the witness withdrew, but I had kept the backup, locked away and never opened again. The company's name flashed in my mind: Garrison Realty Development, and the memories rushed back. Spreadsheets hiding money trails, fake real estate contracts, transactions looped through dozens of shell companies. And one detail made me sit upright. Ethan had worked as legal counsel for Garrison right before we got married. I powered up my old laptop and plugged in the hard drive. The screen lit up with familiar folders: contracts, invoices, email archives. I opened one file and found a string of payment records signed with the executive's digital signatures. And in the corner of one contract, Ethan's name appeared as legal counsel. I leaned back against the wall, my heart pounding. If these documents could be authenticated, they could be a fatal blow, not just to Ethan's law career, but to the political future he was chasing. I knew I needed someone I could trust completely, and who had the skill to verify it all. Only one name came to mind: Noah Carter, a former colleague from the Chicago Tribune, now a senior investigative editor. Noah had been the only one I'd shared those sleepless nights over stacks of files with, and I knew his professional integrity was unshakable. I sent him a brief message: Noah, need to meet. Big. Can't talk over the phone. He replied almost immediately: tomorrow 9 a.m., Old Cafe on Wabash. The next morning I arrived 10 minutes early. The small coffee shop was tucked into a row of red brick buildings, where the smell of espresso mixed with fresh waffle batter always pulled me back to the days when journalism was everything. Noah walked in, tall, lean, in a gray wool coat, his smile carrying a flicker of surprise when he saw me. "Noah Carter. It's been a long time." He set his coffee on the table and sat across from me. "From the sound of things, I'm guessing this call isn't to reminisce." I opened my bag, set the hard drive on the table, and spoke in a low, steady voice. "This contains data from an investigation you've heard of, Garrison Realty Development. And Ethan is involved." Noah frowned, but his eyes lit up when I mentioned Garrison. "I remember that case. We followed it for 6 months until the witness disappeared. You kept the data and never opened it again until last week. Well, I think it's the key to ending everything Ethan's doing. But I need you to verify it to make sure it holds up legally." Noah was silent for a few seconds, then said, "If this is original data and hasn't been tampered with, it's career-ending evidence for anyone connected. But you understand, Dahlia. Once I start digging, there's no going back." "I know." I looked him straight in the eye. "But Ethan used my daughter to pressure me. He sabotaged the fund, smeared my name, and isolated me from everyone. I have no way out." Noah opened his laptop and plugged in the hard drive. He clicked through the folders, his eyes fixed on the screen. I watched his fingers move quickly across the keyboard as file after file opened, each email displayed with full subject lines and message threads. "Oh my God," Noah murmured. "This is everything. Money transfers through shell companies, fake contracts, and," he pointed to the screen, "Ethan Monroe's signature on at least 4 documents." I gripped my coffee cup, heat and cold running through me at the same time. If this goes public, will it destroy him? Not just his law career. Every political opportunity he's chasing will be dead. And he could be facing criminal charges. The feeling was both relieving and heavy. This was the weapon I needed, but it was also a fuse that could pull me into the blast. "How long will you need to verify it?" I asked. "A week, 10 days at most. I'll put my investigative team on it, but your name won't appear anywhere. I trust you." Noah tucked it into his bag. "Dahlia, one piece of advice. Don't let Ethan know you have this. If he even suspects, he'll do whatever it takes to destroy it, and to destroy you." I gave a faint smile. "He already thinks he's destroyed me. Let's see who destroys who." Leaving the cafe, I saw Chicago glowing under the winter sun, light bouncing off a thin layer of ice along the sidewalks. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was walking with purpose. Ethan might be confident in what he'd done, but he didn't know that right now, piece by piece, the ground under him was quietly being pulled away. And I, the woman he thought was beaten, was preparing for the final strike. I didn't expect to see Richard Monroe at my doorstep on a gray Tuesday morning. He stood there, hands in the pockets of a gray wool coat, his gaze both distant and direct. The kind of look from a man who doesn't waste time with small talk. We had never been close. From the moment Ethan and I married, Richard kept his distance, as if I was a choice he'd never approved of for his son. He rarely came over, and when he did, our conversations were brief, sticking to safe topics. "Hello, Dahlia," he said, his deep voice carrying a slight rasp of age. "May I come in?" I hesitated briefly, then opened the door wider. He stepped in, glancing around the living room as if to check that I was still holding it together. "Harper's at school," I said before he could ask. "If you're here to see her." "I came today to see you," he interrupted, settling into the armchair across from me. "And to talk about Ethan." My hands clasped in my lap. "I'm guessing you've read the news. Read it and heard more than the papers wrote. Ethan isn't causing trouble for you, Dahlia. He's waded into a swamp I know better than anyone." I waited for him to continue. "Do you know about the family trust?" Richard asked. "Ethan mentioned it, but never in detail." He leaned back, eyes looking through old memories. "I set it up years ago to protect the family's assets and make sure Harper, and any other children, would have a secure future. But Ethan, he started using it like a personal bank for his political games. Funding campaigns, greasing palms of people I never wanted to deal with." I tightened my hands. "So, what do you want me to do?" Richard leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I know you and Ethan are in a custody fight over Harper. I'll help you get full custody, and I'll block every path for Ethan to access family assets. But I need one condition." "What condition?" "When this all blows up," he paused, looking straight into my eyes, "you keep Harper out of the media circus. Don't let her become a topic of gossip. Don't let her read the worst about her father. I swallowed hard. Do you think I'd do anything else? Harper is the one thing I will never compromise on. Good. Then we have the same goal. We discussed the details that very day. Richard had his own attorney, a former state court official, well-versed in family law and experienced in custody battles where one parent was caught in scandal. He suggested I meet her this week to start gathering documentation. You'll need every piece of evidence showing Ethan's smear campaign and his manipulation of Harper. Texts, emails, statements from teachers or neighbors. Richard's voice was steady, like he was reading from a checklist. I'll handle the financial side. I frowned slightly. The financial side? I'm freezing certain accounts in the trust immediately. Ethan will think it's a routine audit, but it's to cut off his access. And when the time is right, I'll reveal the real reason. His gaze turned sharp. And when that moment comes, I'll make sure it's clear. In my mind, I thought of the hard drive Noah was reviewing. If everything lined up, Ethan laundering money for Garrison plus abusing the family trust, the picture would be undeniable. Richard, if I had information that could completely destroy Ethan's career, would you use it? I asked slowly. I won't go after Harper's father for personal revenge. But if that information proves he's a danger to his own daughter, then yes. Without hesitation. Strangely, that answer made me feel lighter. Richard wasn't an ally out of emotion. He was one out of principle. And in this situation, that principle was a rare lifeline. Before leaving, he paused at the door. Dahlia, I know we've never been close. But I've seen how you raise Harper. You're the only one I trust to give her a safe environment. Don't let Ethan take that away. I won't lose her, Mr. Monroe. The door closed, leaving me alone in the living room, but this time, it didn't feel like complete isolation. I had an ally, and not anyone but the very person who had once stood on the opposite side. I poured myself a glass of water, looking out the window where the dim winter light washed over the street. Ethan thought he had control of the board, but each piece was quietly shifting. And I knew when everything was in place, one well-timed move would turn the game around. On the day of the custody hearing, the Chicago sky was a thick gray, as if it understood the weight of what was ahead. Seated at the petitioner's table, I gripped the folder my attorney, Alan Pierce, had prepared meticulously. Richard took a seat a row behind me, silent, yet his presence felt like a shield. Ethan walked into the courtroom with a triumphant smile, his suit tailored to perfection. He greeted a few familiar faces in the gallery, then shot me a confident look, the kind that came from believing he held all the cards. The judge opened the session, asking each side to present. Ethan's attorney got to his feet, his voice clear and steady. Your Honor, we have evidence that Mrs. Dahlia Monroe engaged in serious violence as a minor, enough to raise questions about the child's safety in her custody. They submitted a packet, enlarging excerpts from the police record when I was 17. They spoke about the victim's injuries and excessive force beyond self-defense, deliberately omitting the fact that I had been attacked first. Ethan didn't look at me as the accusations were read. He simply sat there, fingers interlaced, wearing the expression of someone expecting an easy win. Ellen got to her feet, moving unhurriedly toward the lectern. Her gaze swept the room before she spoke. Your Honor, opposing counsel has cherry-picked their information. We are submitting the complete police file, along with statements from direct witnesses. She handed the judge a stamped, certified packet. Inside was the report from the arresting officer, who documented my injuries, torn clothing, and evidence that I had been assaulted first. There was also a sworn statement from a neighbor who had called 911 after hearing screams and the sound of furniture being overturned. This was not an act of random violence, Ellen said firmly. It was lawful self-defense. Mr. Ethan Monroe's choice to distort the truth in order to tarnish the mother of his child is irresponsible and directly harmful to the child's emotional well-being. I glanced at Ethan. The confidence in his face flickered, but he stayed still, forcing composure. The judge flipped through the file, asking a few clarifying questions. I answered briefly and clearly, keeping my voice steady. Harper was in the children's waiting room, away from the tension as I'd promised Richard. When arguments paused, the judge called for a 15-minute recess. I stepped into the hallway, Ellen close behind. We had barely exited the courtroom when a stir rose at the far end of the corridor. A cluster of reporters was crowded around their phones. Then they surged toward Ethan, cameras and microphones aimed at him. I caught the faint curve of a smile on Richard's face. Noah had moved. I shifted aside, close enough to hear one reporter call out, "Mr. Monroe, any comment on this morning's Chicago Tribune article? They've published documents showing you signed at least 4 contracts tied to Garrison Realty's money laundering activities." Ethan froze mid-stride, caught off guard. Another reporter jumped in. "According to the investigation records, those contracts were used to move millions of dollars through shell companies. How do you explain your signature on them?" Cameras flashed relentlessly. Ethan raised a hand as if to shield his face. I have no comment at this time." But the crowd didn't relent. Another microphone pressed in. "Sources say you're under consideration for criminal charges. Is that true? And do you think this will affect today's custody ruling?" Noah had never promised he'd drop the story on this exact day, but he understood timing. The media pressure right outside the courtroom was a double hit, undermining Ethan's image with the judge and shaking his composure. Ethan turned toward me. His eyes no longer held confidence. They carried the awareness that the board was shifting. I met his gaze with a cold look, then turned away. Back in the courtroom, the judge's demeanor was noticeably sterner. Clearly, the news had reached her. Ellen didn't mention the article directly, she didn't have to, but she emphasized the stability and safe environment Harper needed, and factors that could damage a guardian's public standing. Ethan barely managed to interject. When he tried again to pivot back to my violent past, the judge raised her hand. "We have reviewed the record and determined it was lawful self-defense. The court will not allow this to be used again to speculate on the petitioner's parenting ability." My heart pounded, not from fear but from the sense that the scales were tipping in my favor. Ethan leaned toward his attorney, whispering, but the unease in his body language was clear. During the next break, Ethan approached, lowering his voice. "You think you've won, don't you?" I kept a calm smile. "I think today the truth has started to speak." I could feel the armor Ethan had worn for so long beginning to crack, piece by piece, and this time nothing could shield him from the light of truth. 3 days after the hearing, my phone buzzed with a short message. "I have something important to say to you. Please meet." I almost ignored it. But a part of me wanted to hear what he could possibly say now, with all the curtains pulled back and the light flooding what he'd kept hidden. I replied, setting the meeting at a quiet cafe near the river where no one we knew would stumble in. When I walked in, Ethan was already in the far corner, without the polished confidence he'd worn in court. He looked thinner, with dark circles under his eyes, and the once perfect suit was now wrinkled. "Thanks for coming," he said, his voice hoarse, stripped of its old triumph. I pulled out the chair, keeping my tone even. "What do you want to say?" He hesitated for several seconds, then exhaled. "Dahlia, I know, things have spiraled out of control. I'm not here to fight or make excuses. I'm here to ask you for something. Don't completely destroy my career." His voice dropped to something close to pleading. "I'll withdraw from the custody case. I won't contest it anymore. Just stop pushing this toward criminal charges." I looked straight into his eyes, searching for any feeling, anger, satisfaction, pity. But all I found was a quiet emptiness. "Are you afraid of losing your license or of losing your freedom?" I asked bluntly. He avoided my gaze. "Both. Harper, I know what you think, but I still love her." I took a slow breath. "Then hear my terms. 1. I get full custody of Harper. 2. You resign from the board of the fund, immediately and permanently. 3. You never use the fund's name or any of its projects for political or personal purposes." He looked up as if ready to object, but I cut him off. "If you agree, I won't push the prosecutor to open a criminal case from Noah's article. But if you step back only to come at me again, I won't hesitate." I could see the struggle in his eyes. A man used to winning every negotiation now backed into a corner with nothing left to bargain. At last he nodded. "Fine. I'll have my attorney draft the agreement. You'll sign before the end of this week." He looked like someone who had set down a heavy weight, yet had also lost the most important part of himself. As I stood to leave, he called after me. "Dahlia." I stopped. "I'm sorry." His voice was quiet but steady. "Not just for court. For everything. You've lost more than you think. And it wasn't me who took it from you. Then I walked out, leaving him alone at the table. That afternoon, I settled into the living room with Harper. She was working on her math homework, her hair a little messy after playing with the neighbor's cat. I watched her, my heart sinking as I thought about the past months. The lies Ethan had planted in her mind, the times she had looked at me with doubt in her eyes. "Would you be happy living with me?" I asked softly, not wanting to break her concentration. Harper looked up, frowning. "Dad won't live with us anymore?" "Dad will always be your dad," I said with a small smile. "But you'll be with me full-time and Dad will visit on weekends or whenever you want." She thought for a moment, then nodded. I like it here better. You don't yell on the phone every night." I laughed, pulling her close and kissing the top of her head, still scented with kids' shampoo. "I promise this will always be a safe place for you." 2 days later, the agreement was signed. My attorney, Ellen, whispered as she handed me a copy, "This is the turning point. He's lost the power and he knows it." Ethan didn't show up to sign, he sent his lawyer instead. Richard called that evening, his voice carrying a rare note of relief. "I'll handle my part to make sure he can't touch the family assets again. You, Dahlia, focus on keeping Harper happy." I thanked him, and when I hung up, I realized something strange. There was no urge to celebrate. Maybe because what I wanted most was never to beat Ethan. I wanted peace for myself and my daughter. Ethan was now just a name tied to scandal, a law career sliding downhill, and a financial hole he couldn't fill. He had agreed to my terms, but the look in his eyes at the cafe told me he knew he had lost everything that mattered most. As for me, I still had Harper along with the fund we'd built from nothing. And above all, I had the right to choose my own path from here. And to me, that was worth more than any verdict or legal battle. I started over in the very place I once thought I'd never return to, the fund's small office. After Ethan left the board, several former donors quietly cut ties, leaving big gaps in the budget. But I didn't panic. I knew that if this fund was to survive, it had to rely on transparent resources and people who truly believed in its mission, not money with hidden strings attached. The first meetings were held in a modest room with 4 people. Me, Ellen, my attorney and now the fund's legal advisor, Noah, now an official partner in our media projects, and Rachel, a social worker who had personally helped many women escape abusive relationships. We broke the plan into steps: review all processes, publish transparent quarterly financial reports, and launch fundraising campaigns targeting independent organizations. Richard, despite his age, still came to the office once a week. He didn't get involved in operations, but he always brought a thermos of hot coffee and quiet reminders. At first, Harper was hesitant, especially when I mentioned participating in the fund's activities. She had witnessed too many arguments and hurts, so helping others felt distant. But one day, at a small workshop we held at the community library, Harper sat in the back row, quietly observing. A young woman holding a boy about Harper's age stood up to share her journey of leaving an abusive husband. When she began to cry, I saw Harper walk up and shyly offer the boy a cookie from her pocket. It was such a small gesture, but it warmed my heart. On the way home, she asked, "Mom, will we see them again?" "If you want, we can invite them over," I replied, keeping my voice calm though I was deeply moved inside. From that day, Harper began asking more about my work, about why I did it. She started helping prepare food for our gatherings, even volunteering to fold flyers. Every time I saw her smile while talking to other kids, I knew we were slowly healing. Noah became my right hand in every media campaign. He wasn't skilled in content. He knew how to tell a story without hurting those involved. Once, when a reporter asked why I didn't exploit more of Ethan's scandal for attention, Noah answered for me, "We built this fund to protect and empower, not to use someone's pain as a headline." I was grateful to have a partner who understood the core values I wanted to protect. One late evening, when only Noah and I were left in the office, he handed me a thick file. "Here's the list of funding organizations I've reached out to. A few want to meet in person to hear the plan." I flipped through each page, seeing the persistence in every note. "Thank you, Noah. Without you, He cut in with a smile. "Without you, I wouldn't believe this work was worth losing sleep over." The following spring, we signed a 3-year grant with an international organization dedicated to combating domestic violence. That funding not only stabilized the fund but also opened opportunities for training, legal aid, and emergency shelter for hundreds of women and children. The day we got the news, I came home early with a bouquet of yellow tulips, Harper's favorite. When I set them on the table, she looked up, her eyes bright. "Something good happened, Mom?" "Yes." I hugged her close. "We're going to help even more people." Harper squeezed my hand. "I want to help too." Our home was now filled with laughter and warm evenings. Richard would drop by occasionally, bringing Harper old books he found in the family library. And Noah, no matter how busy, always came for dinner at least once a week, bringing stories that were both funny and inspiring. I still remember that moment clearly, the hum of conversation, the smell of coffee and pastries from the catering table. Light from the large windows fell across a bronze plaque engraved with the Harper Center, the name I chose to honor my daughter and all the children who had walked through darkness but found a way out. While I was speaking with a group of new volunteers, a woman in a beige coat approached. I didn't recognize her face, but her eyes were bright and deliberate. Without a word, she handed me a thin envelope. I opened it gently. Inside was a photo of Ethan, in a dark suit, slightly crooked tie, holding a briefcase, walking up the steps of the federal courthouse. Next to him was a middle-aged man, clearly his attorney. There was no caption, just a single moment caught among countless camera lenses. I ran my fingers along the edge of the photo, feeling the cool paper. For a brief moment, memories of the hearings, his smug looks and calculated words came rushing back. Then I slipped the photo into my bag, lifted my head and smiled at the woman. "Thank you." She nodded and melted into the crowd as if she had never been there. Noah, standing at the reception desk, handing out badges and scanning the room, noticed the change in my expression and walked over, lowering his voice. "Something happen?" I shook my head, replying softly. A reminder that some stories are better left to close on their own. "Then let's get back to the one we're writing." We returned to the warmth of the opening event. Children ran through the new play area, their laughter ringing out. Harper was decorating the cookie table with friends, her face glowing under the golden lights. When she caught my eye, she waved as if to remind me I was standing in the middle of what I had fought for. Richard came over with 2 cups of hot tea. He handed me one and said, "Today you've done more than open a center. You've shown everyone here that hope still exists, even when they think there's no way forward. I want them to know they're not alone," I answered softly. He placed a hand on my shoulder, giving it a gentle squeeze as if to pass along his certainty. Later that afternoon, as the crowd thinned, my team and I sat around the big wooden table in the center of the room. Alan opened a folder and began reading the list of urgent cases we'd start helping next week. Each name was a story, each story a life in need of a hand to pull it from the depths. Noah, jotting notes, looked up. "Are you sure you're ready for this workload? It'll be double what it was before." I glanced around the room, its walls lined with photos of people who had once walked in weary but left smiling. "We can't wait until we feel ready. We do it because they need us and because we can." When night fell, I finally left the center. Outside, the streetlights reflected on the thin layer of snow, casting long streaks of light. I paused, looking through the window at Harper still helping Rachel arrange gift packages for new families. A year ago, that image was something I could only dream of. Today it was right in front of me. And somewhere else, Ethan was facing the consequences he had created. I didn't need to see the end of that story. My ending was already here, in the light, the laughter, and the hands reaching for each other. I pulled my coat tighter and stepped into the cold night, carrying the warmth from inside. Some things don't need to be spoken aloud, yet you still know you're on the right path. We all have crossroads where one decision can change our entire life. For me, it was choosing to let go instead of clinging to something rotten. I believe that sometimes, peace doesn't come from retaliation, but from stopping, turning away, and pouring your energy into what's truly worth it. Harper, the center, the people stepping out of the dark. That's the answer I chose. And what about you? In my place, would you fight until the very end or close the chapter as I did? I genuinely want to hear your perspective. Share it in the comments so we can talk about it. And if you want to keep following these stories of family, betrayal, love, and the strength to stand back up, hit subscribe. There are many more stories ahead, each one a slice of life that might touch your heart.